Hello again, and welcome to Change Starts Here, the Research Conversations edition. I am Kim Yaris, and I am joined by my friend and colleague, Jennifer Chevalier. So we're glad that you're joining us because today we are talking about a very important piece of systemic synergy, authentic educator collaboration.
Yes. So, Kim, let's start by thinking about why teacher collaboration matters. And I think collaboration, when done right, impacts teachers, students, instructional quality, and even the school culture. So, why don't we go into this more deeply by exploring how collaboration impacts those four areas that I just named? And for our audience, if you want to check out the citations, please look at the show notes. So I'm going to start with teachers, if that's okay, Kim.
Sounds good.
All right. So when there is authentic teacher collaboration, teachers can really rely on their colleagues for support during challenging times, which can reduce burnout and improve job satisfaction for teachers. Additionally, teachers develop that collective efficacy, a belief that together they can improve their skills and improve student outcomes. So I think that's where it hits for teachers. Kim, do you want to expand on the impacts of teacher collaboration on students and academic outcomes?
Yeah, sure. So when you ask that question, what immediately comes to my mind is a memory from my own experience as a classroom teacher. When I was at the very beginning of my teaching career, I remember opening up the materials that I'd been given for our history curriculum and feeling completely lost and overwhelmed. I just wasn't that interested in history when I was younger. That's changed, but back then I could have cared less, right? So, and as a young teacher, I was like, whoa, what is this? So, fortunately, one of the teachers on my team was an extremely talented veteran teacher who took me under her wing. So each week we would sit together and plan. And one of the things that came out of that collaboration was we created for students an experience that simulated what it was like to be an immigrant being processed at Ellis Island in the early 1900s. Oh my gosh, it was elaborate, immersive, and amazing.
It
And
sounds fun.
oh my gosh, after we did this, the kids talked about it for days. I mean, they had come in costume. We had enlisted a help of all kinds of parents, but, from exiting the boat to, seeing the doctor. I mean, it was to having different languages being spoken. It was the hustle and bustle. I mean, we just left no stone unturned. And so the kids talked about it for days. And to say that it was engaging is an understatement. And I know that if I was not working together with this teacher, this would not have ever been my students' experience learning history, right? And so I think that what this does is put a spotlight on one of the most powerful impacts of teacher collaboration is that it is just beneficial to students. The power of synergy is that it amplifies individual strengths, combining resources and expertise to create something that is far greater than what any of us could achieve alone. So in this case, her experience and creativity blended with my fresh perspective and enthusiasm to craft this learning experience that deeply resonated with students. And collaboration like this doesn't just lighten the load of teachers, because it does, but it just also enriches the classroom in ways that spark curiosity, foster engagement, and make learning truly unforgettable.
That is such a powerful example, Kim. And as you were talking about that, I could still feel the passion you had around that experience.
Mhm.
And so that speaks back to that first part of the impact on teachers, right? It's even fulfilling to teachers
Yeah,
while we're hitting those academic outcomes and impacting students. So that's great.
great point.
Um, I'm thinking back to my time as an instructional coach. I was dispatched to support a dysfunctional team at one school site, and their student achievement scores were among the lowest in the district. So, walking in, I was expecting teachers that were largely inexperienced or even maybe not certified for the content areas they were teaching. So, that's what I was thinking going in. But after I met with each team member individually, I was really surprised to learn that each one of them was incredibly knowledgeable, experienced, and capable. So I really just had to sit back and wonder about the low student academic performance because it didn't seem to align with the skill set of the teachers. So I decided my next step would be to just sit in on one of their collaborative planning sessions. And that's when I could see the issue. It was such a contentious environment. Two of the people on the team dominated the instructional planning, and the others just sat back, arms crossed, and just nodded along
Oh
as the
my.
other two were
Mm.
going. I know. So I was observing the ones that were quiet, and I could see from their body language and even their facial expressions that they had ideas to contribute, but they were just holding them back. So at the next collaborative planning session, I asked the team to just kind of step out in faith and try an experiment with me. I gave each person 4 poker chips. I raided my son's closet because he had a poker set that my brother had given him. And the poker chips were kind of like an inside joke to myself, since this was kind of a gamble doing this strategy. So the poker chips just seemed like the right tool.
Love the symbolism. And they're so lucky that they had you.
Oh, well, thanks. We'll see how it turns out. So, as the team worked through the sequence of planning, the idea was they had to pay 1 chip for each thing that they said so that they could each only say 4 things. And when someone ran out of chips, they needed to just remain quiet until everyone else had used up all of their chips. And then we just redistributed them. So this approach really forced the two who typically dominated the conversation to think carefully about what they wanted to share because they knew that it was limited. And then it leveled the playing field. There was really an expectation that those who typically remain quiet would need to contribute. It gave them a space to share their ideas and have a voice, and it really required their participation. It turned out to be a great example of high expectations for all of the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what I heard at the end of the 45 minutes was just amazing. It was clear to everyone that all 5 of the team members had great ideas and valuable insights to contribute. And I could see the confidence in the teachers that had historically been quiet. And I could see that the dominant teachers really began to respect the other ones. So they actually asked me to bring the chips to their weekly planning meeting because they immediately saw the impact of true synergy on the quality of the instructional plans that they were creating together. And as you might expect, the academic outcomes for their students soared. So to me, this is really the best example I have of the power of authentic educator synergy because the only thing that changed was that level of synergy. It was still the same teachers teaching the same content to the same kids. What changed was how they leveraged each person's strengths and expertise for the success of all.
That is incredible. Incredible. See, I knew that they were lucky to have you. And I can really relate to that because I was one of the quiet ones too. I would be, especially when I was a young teacher, I was afraid to speak up. And I just love how in this example, the strategy helped the team members to find their voice. I know that I would have benefited from that kind of intentional support. It's almost like you pulled back the curtain of the potential of that entire team. And so it wasn't there, but it really, really was always there.
Yeah.
And so it just revealed what's possible when everyone's strengths are amplified. And I think that kind of gets at the essence of authentic educator collaboration. It's about bringing out the best in each individual to elevate the collective. So, that said, we know the impact of collaboration at the student level can be powerful. Do you think that it has an impact at the school level as well?
I definitely do. I think, two specific ways right off the top of my head are creates supportive learning environments and high trust cultures. So collaboration really reduces teacher isolation, which then increases morale and really promotes that sense of community, that sense of belonging. And it definitely creates high trust school cultures when synergy is handled correctly, because teachers, when they really collaborate, they learn to trust each other. And this is the key to feeling psychologically safe and being able to be vulnerable in the environment of like co-planning, instructional planning. So we can, when we feel trusted and we feel safe, we can give and accept feedback, which elevates everybody. So when we can admit that we are struggling with something and we can seek solutions, that is obviously really healthy and promotes growth. But when trust is non-existent, it's like a duck and cover environment. Teachers feel like they can't admit when they're struggling with something because they're afraid it'll be used against them. No one feels comfortable giving or receiving feedback because it comes across as a personal attack. It's just so messy.
I understand what you mean. I've worked in a lot of schools and have seen how low trust is a real barrier to synergy.
At one point in my teaching career, my role overlapped with two different teams. So there was such a stark contrast between how the two teams operated. And the difference was really essentially the trust. And one team had a really high level of trust, and the team could really dig into data without feeling judged. And they would collaborate on solutions for certain skills or certain students. There's actually a student in my class that year who was really bright and capable in most areas, but writing was a tremendous obstacle for him. It was like there was just a block there. No matter what I tried with writing, I couldn't engage him. He would literally sit there and just turn in a blank sheet of paper, no matter how I tried to scaffold the work or, chunk it into smaller pieces. I could not really connect with him in writing. But I observed in the hallway and in other common areas that this student just had a connection with one of the other teachers on the team. And so we tried an experiment. The other teacher took time to mentor the student around writing specifically. And I'm not, talking about like a formal 30-minute after school mentorship. It was just, she would ask him about what he was writing or ask him to bring a piece of something he was writing so that she could look at it. And the student just felt like a new energy and motivation around writing because of this relationship that he had with this other teacher. And his work quickly improved. I mean, he was actually writing and he was very skilled at it. There's just something I couldn't draw out in him in that area. So I was sharing this experience with the other team that is low trust, as a way to model for them how it could be, right? How we could work together for the benefit of everybody. And they were just shocked. I got comments like, why would that teacher help when she wouldn't get any of the credit for it? She just made you look good because his scores improved and he was in your class. And I was like, well, that's an interesting perspective. Privately, one of those teachers just said to me, I would never be able to do what you did. I want to help each kid, but I would never admit that I can't handle it on my own.
But that's such a great example of how you were building trust with those teams that you were working with. Like you modeled being vulnerable to them, which I think is part of what makes it okay to be vulnerable. And I do think that that's such a key ingredient of the kind of communication and trust that needs to be in place when we are, creating environments that really support effective educator collaboration. So I heard it in your example, but, even going back to my Ellis Island simulation, when I think about what did we do that could be replicated, we met weekly to plan. So that weekly planning was building trust between us, right? It was every time, it was like making a deposit so that I would feel okay, lending my voice and, saying when I didn't know stuff about history. And it allowed her to support me. But we were coming together too around shared goals, right? We wanted what was best for kids. I mean, that's ultimately, we needed them to learn history and we wanted them to have these rich, engaging experiences. So we had these shared goals. So these shared goals, the circumstances that allowed for vulnerability and open communication. What would you add, Jennifer, from your example that kind of gets at what needs to happen for educator collaboration to be really effective?
I think the bottom line, Kim, is just that teachers collectively can achieve things that they can't individually.
Oh, so well said.
Yeah. So when teachers focus on what's best for kids and feel psychologically safe to admit when they're struggling, that's when improvement occurs, right? And of course, when teachers are more effective, students benefit, families benefit, we all benefit.
Yeah, but the thing about collaboration, though, even though we intend toward it, it doesn't always happen. Why do you think that is?
That is so true, Kim. I think there are definitely barriers to collaboration that leaders need to consider. So I think if we just face it right now, if we aren't intentional about creating the conditions for authentic teacher collaboration, it's just not going to happen. So I think some of the most common barriers, number one, time, right? There's
Oh,
never enough time in education, ever.
nope.
And that comes through in just lack of time or conflicting schedules. The people that would need to meet together don't have breaks at the same time to plan. And, you were talking about this experienced teacher mentoring you. Sometimes there's not time built in for that kind of collaboration to take place. So I think time's the first thing that comes to mind. I also think, sometimes it's not prioritized by administrators. They have a million different things that they're thinking of. And so sometimes they're just kind of passive about it and they don't prioritize it. But I've also seen in schools where it's more of a competitive environment and, different teachers, student scores are being compared all the time, and it creates this culture where it's just not conducive to synergy. I think there are also, cultures of silos, like, hey, I'm going to do my thing, you do your thing, or, my students are different from yours, so what you're doing wouldn't work with mine, or my teaching style is different than yours, so I can't do what you just did because that's not my thing, that type of approach. We've already talked about low trust or poor relationships. And then I think sometimes teachers get together and they really do want to collaborate effectively, but they just lack the know-how. Like, what does that look like? And so making sure that they know what effective collaboration looks like, sounds like, feels like. We don't want to make it too rigid because then they're just focusing on compliance, but we also don't want to make it too loose because then there's not going to be much productivity and relevance. So that's what comes to mind for me about barriers. What do you
Yeah.
think about how leaders could overcome some of these barriers to authentic teacher collaboration?
Yeah. So, like any problem, there's no quick fix, but I think mindset is everything when we encounter barriers. And I, in these circumstances, like to remind myself to start by thinking about what is in our circle of influence. What can we do? And I think that one thing we can do is come together around shared goals for students, like that age-old question, what is best for students? And what is our end in mind? And how can we together combine our resources and expertise to create this something that's going to be far greater than what any of us can achieve alone? So, like just saying those words gets me so jazzed up and excited. It creates energy, which I think is an important first step, because the thing about barriers is that they feel us leaving energy depleted. A second thing I would say that comes to my mind is about being intentional about sharing ideas. Like when time is a barrier, we oftentimes get stuck in this paradigm of feeling like in order to optimize collaboration, we need to have X amount of time in order to be effective. But I think that the truth is that even a small amount of time given to collaboration can have a powerful impact. Like, for example, I've been in instances where I've had just small collegial conversations and somebody mentions something great that they did in their classroom, and that inspires my thinking. I'm like, wow, that was like 2 minutes with you and I have this great idea, or 2 minutes with you and I want to try that too, right? And that's powerful. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's something that we can do. So, I feel like we could probably sit and think of even more ideas, but unfortunately, we are almost out of time. So we'll do this. If you're interested in diving deeper into these ideas, we've included a staff booster in the show notes that will help you to cultivate a culture of collaboration at your school. We're going to include some practical steps and strategies so that you can embrace shared goals, foster idea sharing, and basically make the most of the time that you have to connect with colleagues. So, I want to just end by saying, remember, small, intentional actions can lead to powerful, lasting changes.
Awesome. I just had a flashback to our remodeling silos episode, just creating windows so people could see in, and that little 2-minute interaction you talked about felt like one of those. Somebody just let you peek into what they were doing and you ran off with the idea and made it your own. I think ultimately, Kim, we agree that collaboration is just a key component of systemic synergy. If teachers work together, outcomes improve, the workload decreases. So it's just a win all the way around. To our audience, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Change Starts Here. Next time, we're going to be discussing future-focused lesson planning. Make sure to like and subscribe so you know when it drops.
Thank you.